Today, we are diving deep into a gardening technique that, let's be honest, feels completely wrong but gets you absolutely amazing results. We're talking about deadheading and how this one simple snip lets you literally hack your garden's bloom cycle for more flowers all season long.
So let's just tackle the big question right away, the one that trips up so many of us. You're telling me that to get more flowers, I have to destroy the ones I already have? It just sounds completely backward, right? But stick with me here, because there is some seriously powerful logic behind what looks like, well, total destruction.
And this quote, this is the key to understanding everything. You have to think of a plant's life cycle as its biological software, its programming. Deadheading isn't just about making things look tidy. It is a direct intervention. You are literally hacking the plant's code to get it to do something it was never designed for. Just keep blooming over and over again for you. So let's really get into what this secret weapon is all about and how this totally counterintuitive cut actually works. At its heart, it's just the simple act of removing old, fading flowers from a plant. But the effect? The effect it has is just profound. You see, when a flower starts to fade, it's not just an aesthetic issue. It's sending a very, very specific chemical signal through the entire plant. And that signal basically screams, mission accomplished. We're done here. Shut down flower production and get all that energy over to making seeds. So leaving that old flower on the stem, it's like leaving a giant stop sign up for the whole operation. Now, if we're going to master this hack, we need to understand the plant's code, its most basic motivation. Why does removing one little flower have such a massive system-wide impact? Well, it all comes down to understanding its prime directive. And here is the hard truth, folks. Plants are not blooming for us. They could not care less about our beautiful patios or our flower arrangements. A flower is basically just a billboard, a flashy advertisement designed for one purpose, to attract pollinators. The plant has one goal, and one goal only: legacy. It's all about making viable seeds to ensure its species survives. That's the whole game. And this whole process is a one-way street. The plant gathers up all this energy through its leaves, then it spends a huge amount of that energy to make a flower. Once that flower gets pollinated, the mission changes completely. It's all about producing seeds. And once those seeds are mature, the plant's job is officially done. It'll either die if it's an annual, or it'll go dormant if it's a perennial. Our little hack interrupts this entire process right between step 3 and step 4. Okay, this is the really crucial part. It's all about a hormonal switch. The second that old flower starts making seeds, it's like a little factory that starts pumping out these stop hormones, things like auxins and ethylene. These chemicals, they just flood the system, traveling down the stem and basically shouting a system-wide stop command. It literally blocks new flower buds from even thinking about forming. So when you snip off that flower, you're shutting down the factory, you're removing the source of those stop signals. And this all comes down to the plant's energy economy. See, a developing seed pod is what botanists call a massive energy sink. It takes way more resources than a flower ever will. So by cutting it off, you remove that sink, and suddenly all that energy that was headed there has to go somewhere else. And when you know it, the plant's next best option is to, make more flowers. Okay, so now we get the why. So let's dive into the how. This section is all about the practical stuff, the right tools, the right techniques, everything you need to know to make sure you're hacking the plant the right way. And this right here is the #1 mistake people make. They do what I call the barbershop cut. Just snipping off the brown, crispy petals because they look ugly. That does nothing. I mean, literally nothing. As long as that little green swelling base, the ovary where the seeds are actually forming, is still there, those stop hormones are still being produced. You have to perform a surgical cut. You've got to remove the entire reproductive organ. Now, for soft-stemmed plants, like your petunias or marigolds, you don't even need any tools. It's super simple. You just follow the spent flower stem down to the first set of leaves and just pinch it off right there. It's fast, it's efficient, and that crushing action actually helps seal the little wound on these tender plants, which helps prevent disease. But for the tougher, woodier plants, think roses or zinnias, you're going to need some pruners, and the technique is just as specific. You follow that stem down to a healthy set of leaves. Now, why there? Because right at the base of that leaf is a little dormant bud, just waiting for a signal. By cutting just a 1/4 inch above it, you're sending a huge surge of energy and hormones right to that bud, telling it, hey, wake up, it's your turn to bloom. But listen, any good hacker knows their system. The techniques we just talked about don't work the same on every single plant. So the next level here is to start categorizing the plants in your garden to know which ones are going to respond best to this whole intervention. So let's break it down. I like to think of plants in 3 main groups. First up, you've got your adrenaline junkies. These are mostly your annuals, right? The marigolds and so on. They just rebloom like crazy all season long. Then you have the second wind plants. Think salvia. Deadheading these guys gives you a fantastic second, later burst of flowers. And last but not least, we have the one-hit wonders. And this is such a crucial distinction. For plants like peonies or lilies that are basically programmed to bloom only once a season, you still deadhead them. But your goal is totally different. You're not trying to get more flowers this year. That's not going to happen. What you're doing is preventing them from wasting all that precious energy on making seeds. And instead, you're forcing them to store all of that energy down in their roots for a bigger, stronger, more spectacular show next year. Of course, modern plant breeding has thrown a few curveballs our way. You've got these self-cleaning plants like wave petunias. They're actually sterile. They can't make seeds, so they never get the stop signal and just bloom on and on and on. And with something like roses, you actually have a choice. Just snapping the head off will give you more flowers and faster. But a deeper, more surgical prune down to a set of leaves, that'll give you fewer blooms, but they'll be much stronger and higher quality. It's a classic case of quantity versus quality. But you know what they say? With great power comes great responsibility. A good hacker also knows when to stop, when it's time to log off and just let the system run its natural course. Because forcing blooms too late into the season can actually do a lot more harm than good. Here's a really simple rule to remember. About 6 weeks before your area's first average frost date, just put the pruners away. Seriously, let those last flowers do their thing and go to seed. This sends a really critical signal to the plant that it's time to start shutting down and preparing for winter. And there are 3 fantastic reasons to stop. First, you prevent the plant from pushing out all this tender new growth that's just going to get zapped by the frost, which could damage the plant itself. Second, those seed heads on plants like coneflowers and rudbeckia become a vital food source for winter birds like goldfinches. And finally, those dried flower heads from hydrangeas or sedums, they provide incredible structure and beauty in a quiet, snowy winter garden. It's just gorgeous. So when you get right down to it, that's what all of this really is. It's not about domination or control. It's a conversation. It's an interactive process. The plant says, okay, I think I'm done. I've made my seeds. And you, the gardener, get to reply, you know what? Not just yet. How about you give it one more try? You're working together to create something amazing. So really the only question left is, once you start having this conversation, once you start making those surgical cuts and redirecting all that amazing energy, what is your garden going to say back to you?